Listeners, I am here with Gunnar Esiason. Gunnar lives with cystic fibrosis. He is an advocate and a public speaker, and he is the co-host of Breathe In, a cystic fibrosis podcast. We are thrilled to have him on Bloodstream. Welcome, Gunnar, and welcome, fellow podcaster. You know all the things. You're going to know all my tricks.
Yeah, hey, Amy, thanks for having me on. It's been a little while since I've had a podcast. Breathe In came to a conclusion a few years back, but it's always fun to get back behind the mic.
You know, we have so many patient advocates that listen to the show, and they love to go back through, like, you know, I don't know, chronic disease, rare disease podcast. So I'm sure you'll get hopefully a bump from.
It still lives on the internet forever. So that's the nice thing about that.
Also terrifying.
Yeah. So, when I run for senator in 25 years, hopefully what I said on the podcast doesn't come back to
You're going to have to get it. Everything has to get off of there. It's great. Well, I guess, tell me, I mean, to be lame, tell me your story. Tell me your CF story. What has it been like? Tell me the things.
Yeah, that's a big question. But thanks for having me on. I'm living with cystic fibrosis. I am 31 years old. Actually, I'll probably be 32 by the time this is published.
Happy
my
birthday.
My birthday's coming up in a couple weeks. But I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis in 1993 when I was 2 years old. My dad was at the peak of his NFL career, playing with the New York Jets at the time. And my parents saw an opportunity to put a face on an otherwise very well unknown disease. You know, cystic fibrosis is a rare disease. And since then, our family's foundation has raised in excess of $160 million in the fight against cystic fibrosis. And a lot of that funding has gone towards, clinical R&D, but also improvements in patient financial assistance. The foundation has very much grown as the cystic fibrosis population has, during this generation, been very fortunate to age. It's actually one of the most remarkable stories in medicine right now is cystic fibrosis. And I'm sure we'll sort of get into that a little bit later. But, my life course with cystic fibrosis was fairly typical for someone born with CF my generation. I kind of had some ups and downs through my childhood and some different health hurdles as I kind of got through high school. But once I finally graduated college, my health was basically in a complete free fall. And that was due in large part to the antibiotic resistance bacteria that lives within our lungs inside cystic fibrosis patients. And really what that kind of means for listeners who may not know is that as you treat bacterial infections with antibiotics over and over and over throughout the course of somebody's life, those antibiotics become weaker and weaker as the bacteria evolves to become more and more impervious to those treatments. And that's kind of the negative feedback loop that I was caught in when I was 22 or 23 years old. And I was kind of confronted with the reality that I was very quickly headed to end-stage illness. And what that means in cystic fibrosis is, very quickly short of breath, lots of mucus production, coughing. It's not a pretty sight. And to sort of put a picture on what that looked like at that time is that when I was, some mornings when I was in the middle of a pulmonary exacerbation or really a symptom flare, getting from the bedroom to the bathroom some mornings to brush my teeth was almost impossible without falling into some sort of respiratory distress. And hearing me talk about that right now feels like another lifetime ago. And I'm sure, like, looking at me through the Zoom call that we're on, it's probably hard to imagine. And sort of the nice part of the story is that after living like that for a couple of years, I finally got into a clinical trial in 2018 for a drug that came to be known as Trikafta. It basically changed my life in a matter of hours. Within 24 hours, my oxygen saturation climbed. Within 36 hours, my cough started to dissipate, and then a week later, the symptoms of cystic fibrosis very much started to vanish. So it's been a wild ride, especially over especially over the last 5 years. But it's really kind of what's going on across the cystic fibrosis population, with a few exceptions here or there. But it's really one of the more remarkable stories out there.
Incredible. I do have questions about kind of the treatment landscape and how that has changed in your lifetime and what that must be like. But kind of going back to patient advocacy and knowing that your parents started this foundation when you were young. Of course, your father is a public figure, is Gunnar Esiason, for those that haven't put two and two together. When was your turning point when you kind of took this on your own, that you wanted to speak about it, that you wanted to be a public face and a public advocate for this? What was that like for you as a young man?
Yeah, I think my parents are very aware that they did not give me a choice when I was diagnosed with CF to, go on, the cover of Sports Illustrated, as my dad and I did when I was, a really little kid.
Yeah.
Like, they are very aware that they made that choice for me, and they had no expectations for me as I grew up to sort of take that on.
Yeah.
As I said, when I came out of college and I was very, very sick, at about 22 or 23, I started to be getting more involved with day-to-day operations inside our family's foundation. And one of my first responsibilities was managing interviews for our scholarship program. So, we offer a number of scholarships for people with cystic fibrosis and their family members now who are going to college. And I was handed the responsibility of interviewing our applicants. And I got to meet so many people with CF through those interviews over those first couple of years of doing it, that I started to put together some patterns and some understanding of what people were dealing with. And I could, in some cases relate to them. And in other cases, I was learning, a whole other side of cystic fibrosis that was out there. And it was pretty informative for me to hear, about all the pain points that people had, whether it was not getting a provider to listen to them or, struggling under the weight of the insurance industry, trying to get medicines covered, not understanding the value of this clinical trial versus another competing clinical trial, both of which were hungry for patients, and how to understand which one to choose or which one is a better choice. So all of these kind of conversations kept popping up over and over and over and over again during these these scholarship interviews of all places, that I kind of felt it was like a little intelligence gathering, but also I was realizing that there was I had a platform to start talking more publicly about drug development, patient-centeredness, patient-centered care, all of these different things. And it also piqued my interest. I started just learning as much about it as I could. I started devouring resources, making contacts, building a network. And it's really all due in large part to those interviews that I was doing.
Interesting. You mentioned that once you found this treatment, got on the clinical trial, life changed instantly, which I have never heard anything like that where it was that fast. Did you forget about it? Why are you still a public advocate? Why is it so important for you to still be public about this?
I think, for a few reasons. One, the story of cystic fibrosis is so remarkably successful that other rare conditions should follow our playbook, right? Like, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation set, a path to treat and conquer cystic fibrosis. And while we haven't achieved a cure, nor have we been able to find a medicine that, positively impacts everyone, right? The medication that I'm on is appropriate for about 90% of the patient population with CF. There's still about 10% of the patient population that unfortunately can't benefit, and they still kind of deal with the classic CF. And really what I've taken away from that is that we have a model for really altering the course of a condition, and that needs to be applied to other rare diseases especially, and it can. So that was one motivating factor for me. But two, right, the quest isn't over, right? We're still on the path to a cure for cystic fibrosis. Patients should have a more impactful role in our delivery of healthcare. And those are two kind of pillars that I sit upon, and that's really the story of why I guess I'm still out there doing what I'm doing.
That's cool. I sometimes feel that patient advocacy is thankless work at times. It feels like just yelling into the void. And so I wonder, how have you seen your passion and your story pay off, and what has it been like when you haven't felt heard?
Well, I think what I realized, especially after I started taking Trikafta, was that I had a very weird career, right? I spent the first 5 or 6 years of my life out of school dealing with intense illness.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until several months into that clinical trial that my wife and I, she was my girlfriend at the time, but my now wife, were on a road trip together. We could finally do things together, right? We could finally just leave and go travel and stuff. And we were, of all places, we were stuck in traffic on the New Jersey Turnpike, and she turned to me and she said, you have the rest of your life to look forward to. What do you want to do with your life now? And it was a good question. I had never once considered it. But after, a summer of reflecting on, where I had been, what I had gone through, the insights that I had picked up of living with severe cystic fibrosis, I realized that I didn't really have technical skills. Right? I didn't have technical business skills or public health skills or medical skills or anything. Everything was pretty much self-taught through severe disease, talking with patients and other clinical people in the CF world. And I realized that I needed to go out there and get them. So I applied to business school. I got in and I went through 3 years of grad school, got an MBA and MPH, and I decided that I should marry that very technical, technical sort of part of the working world with the very intricate experiences that I have of living with CF, and sort of could see what would come out of it. So actually out of school, I now work for a startup called Florence Healthcare. We provide technology solutions to accelerate clinical trials and to increase the capacity of research sites to actually enroll more patients and make it go faster. So I guess that's one place where I've applied patient advocacy into sort of the working world or into the business world where, my perspective is that if you put the right patients with the right qualifications in the right businesses at the right time, you can actually make the healthcare system more patient-centric.
That's cool. That's cool. Congratulations. That's cool. I read a quote of yours somewhere. The greatest curse of CF is that you know what's coming. And that hit me, and it made me think of our hemophilia patients. And I wondered if you could put more words to that.
Yeah. So, what I meant by that is that our cystic fibrosis community is actually very small, very intricate, very patients very much know each other. One of the weird parts of cystic fibrosis is that because there isn't an infectious disease component to it, 2 people with CF actually can't be in the same proximity of each other. So for decades, we've been practicing like the social distancing buzzword that everyone's used over the last
Oh my
couple
gosh,
of
I
years.
didn't even think about that.
So we do it with each other, right? So
Yeah.
2 people with CF can sort of share the same strain of bacterial infection, and that can create a whole sort of problems. But one sort of byproduct of that is that the CF community has sort of rallied around, online communities, from the dawn of social media or even before. And as a result, you grow up with these friendships that with other people with CF. And you mentioned about the podcast that I did earlier, the Breathe In podcast. My 2 co-hosts were 2 women with cystic fibrosis that I had never actually met in person. The sort of downside to that, however, though, is you see people firsthand go through the end stages of cystic fibrosis. And really kind of in the days before Trikafta, really, there was only one ending that we all sort of foresaw, and it was the very severe respiratory disease. And then finally, your respiratory sort of symptoms overcome every other part of your body. So when I talk about knowing what was coming my way before Trikafta hit, I was very clearly and very much a realist, knowing that I was quickly running out of options, and it just so happened that the Trikafta trial rolled around sort of at the right time for me.
Wow. Unreal. So what's next for you? What's next for the community? What are some of the things you're working on, and what are some of the hopes in the next couple of years? Well,
I think, our Families Foundation, we recently launched an IVF assistance grant for people with cystic fibrosis who want to go through family building. One of the other little unknown parts of CF is that 98 to 99% of men are infertile. Right? We're born with congenital absence of the vas deferens, meaning that sperm can't exit our body unless it's medically extracted. And unfortunately, here in the U.S., IVF is not universally covered. In some states, it's starting to get better. With some employers, it's starting to get better. But broadly across the states, IVF and family building treatments are not covered by insurance. So we've stepped up to provide financial resources for as many families as we can help grow as possible. The second thing that I'm really looking forward to, at least from like the development and evolution of the CF community, is we're standing on the precipice of a number of gene therapies starting to enter the clinic in the next couple of years here, especially for the part of the population that does not benefit from Trikafta. So that's a very small part of our population, but on the nice side of it, there's a lot of gene therapies that are sort of working their way through the preclinical stages and then entering the clinic here. And it's going to create like this weird little dynamic, actually, where you have a lot of clinical trials that are going to be hungry for a very finite number of patients. And one thing that I do want to see happen is I want to see that patients take their leverage as a finite resource and start to reform clinical trials for the better moving forward, right? So I think that's one thing that patient communities don't really quite realize they have, and it's that they have the leverage as a finite resource to change things for the better, right? Make them more patient-centric, make follow-up times easier, make clinical visits easier, make the whole process more accessible and easier for everyone, and that's something that I think patient communities should start to rally around, especially as trials start to get more complex in the near future.
Oh man, hear, hear. I haven't heard anybody say it quite like that and quite impassioned. That must be your public speaking. You must crush every time you go out. You actually alluded to it, and my final question, congratulations, you're a dad.
I am a dad. We welcomed our son to the world at the end of 2021, so he's about 15 months old, which has been super cool.
Oh, that's great. Oh, what a perfect age. Well, congratulations. Are you sleeping? Can you sleep? Or
we are trying to sleep. But no, it's been good. He is a super emotive baby. He's very awake, aware. He is got a huge personality. Especially coming from my family, I guess that's not super shocking. But it's been super fun to watch him grow. It's been super fun to see my parents, his grandparents change. It's been fun to see my wife change. It's been fun to see my in-laws change. It's been fun to see me change. But I recognize that the fact that he's even here is something of a small miracle. So it's I try to reflect on it as much as I can. I catch myself just like looking at him and just being in like disbelief. So super, super cool.
Oh, that's so great. Oh, all the heart swells. Well, thank you so much for being with us. Honestly, this was a joy. Where can listeners follow you? Where can we do all the things? Yeah,
so I have a website, GunnarEsiason.com. Good luck spelling that with all the vowels. You can also...
Google it.
Yeah, you can also catch me on Twitter at G17Esiason.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Cool. Thanks, Amy.